Hi there and thank you for tuning in. Today I want to make a video that's a little bit different from what you normally find on this channel because I've done a lot of lens reviews and normally I present tons of evidence so you can see how I've reached my conclusions and so on. But today I want to talk specifically about two lenses that have roughly the same focal length, and I want to talk about how I use them and why I'm not so happy with the newer lens, my Nikon lens, unfortunately. So I'm not going to do a traditional review or pretend that I'm out shooting butterflies or stuff like that, because I use these lenses for a very different purpose. So be mindful that this review or comparison is super specific for my use case. So the Tokina lens here is an old friend of mine. It's been with me for 5 or 6 years. You can get a copy for around 200 euros. Used, that is, but check the prices, inflation, all that. This is May 2023. There's no electronics in this lens. It's dependent on the autofocus motor sitting in the camera. It has no vibration reduction. The lens moves in and out when you focus and so on. It's a little bit like driving an old car. You start wishing you had a more comfy ride, right? You can hear the ring here changes between manual and autofocus, and it's quite a clunky sound, isn't it? So yeah, it's just noisy. It feels dated. The images that comes out of it is actually quite okay. I have a little thing for chromatic aberrations where I'm super skeptical. For some reason I shoot images that have super high contrast. So I often see this purple fringing. I need to sit and fix that in post, and that is a pain. So I would say those two drivers, the chromatic aberrations and then the fact that it feels a little bit dated. It's not like there was something wrong with it. I just had a hope that I could have a more comfortable shooting experience. Those were actually the two drivers behind why I started looking for another lens. So I decided to jump from the old mechanical lens to this very modern lens with vibration reduction and focuses internally, has 2 focus motors, and it's just a really, really modern lens. And it will set you back around €1,000, around $1,000. Again, check the prices, inflation and all that, but it's in that space. I bought my copy used, so that's where I got the price from. So it is 5 times as expensive as the old Tokina, so it's quite a jump, both in technology but also in price, of course. But I would say this lens, from a technical perspective, is probably the best lens I've ever owned. The image quality is just outstanding. There's no, as far as I can tell, there's no chromatic aberration, or it is extremely well controlled. I've not been able to force it to generate any chromatic aberration. Of course, it's tag sharp, micro contrast, all of that. If you see the MTF chart, read other reviews, this is just the top of the line lens. No doubt about it. An amazing lens. So a lot of praise. So why I'm not happy? Well, it has to do with the shooting experience. Remember the 2 drivers I had for moving away from the Tokina? It was mainly about having that feeling you were driving an old car, and then also the chromatic aberrations. The chromatic aberrations, check. I can say that one is solved. No chromatic aberrations issues anymore here with this lens. But the shooting experience, I had hoped for a very pleasing, efficient shooting experience, basically with this lens or this combo. But I will say the autofocus. Now, I should be a little bit careful with autofocus, because autofocus is always a cooperation between your camera and your lens, right? So if you're shooting with another camera, say the Z7, or you're shooting with the Z9, I think the Z9 has a really, really fantastic autofocus system. You may get very different results from what I'm reporting here. But for this combo, which is what I'm using, the autofocus is really poor. And I used that, I compared to the Tokina together with my Nikon D4. I'm sorry to say, it just doesn't work. It hunts and it hunts and it hunts. And it's really seldom that it acquires focus for my style of shooting. And maybe it's because I'm not exactly overlighting the scene, but it gets a little bit better when you add a lot of light. It also gets better if you upgrade the firmware. I've seen that a few times when a new version of the firmware comes out. It gets a little bit better. So maybe In 10 versions time, this will be a good combo. But as it is right now, May 2023, I'm not a happy camper. And the lens will hunt. Can you hear the focus motor working? Let me see if I can you hear the motor working here? This is what I call the sad whale song, and you will listen to that a lot. And it's just really annoying to listening to this sound while you're waiting for the lens to try and acquire focus. And you can see it walks right past the focus point, back and forth and back and forth, and it's just and when you're shooting with a macro lens, you're typically very close to your subject and you have a paper thin depth of field, right? So focus needs to be super sharp, and it's just really annoying to not be able to do that automatically. So of course the alternative is to switch to manual focus, and here comes my second gripe with this lens. Don't do this at home, but see here, when I push the lens, you can see the focus ring starts turning, right? There is a mechanical relationship between the focus ring and then the glass moving. That is not the case in the Nikkor lens here. There is a motor that is activated when I turn the ring here, but that is done based on me turning the ring, a computer assessing how fast and how much am I turning the ring, and then it activates the motor. And that means there is a slight delay. I know it is super slight, but it is there. And you can hear, if I rock it back and forth, I can actually do that in such a way that the motor is not activated at all, because the computer is sitting there thinking, what's he doing? What's he doing? What should I do? What should I do? And that will never happen on a mechanical lens like the Tokina over there. And this is just when you sit. I mean, I don't know if you've shot with a micro lens or doing micro photography, but you're working with a depth of field that is paper thin, and you need, in order to nail focus, you need to put that focus plane exactly one position and one position only, because there is no forgiveness in the depth of field when you're shooting that close to your subject. Forget it. It has to be spot on. And then when you sit and work with a lens where there's sort of a slack, just like when you're driving an old car, you remember an old car with a steering wheel, sometimes where you had to turn it a little bit before the wheels actually started to turn. It's a little bit the same feeling. And it just, couldn't we have a mechanical focus, please? That would be really nice. So I'm actually thinking, I'm still assessing this lens, I must admit. I haven't made a decision yet, but I'm actually seriously thinking about going back to one of the F-mount lenses that Nikon has made, a macro lens that is, and use that instead. Simply because I suspect that the focus system will be much better, because it's a focus system that has been developed in the DSLRs over decades, rather than this relatively modern focus systems in the mirrorless systems. So I hope that will be better. And in addition to that, I'm pretty sure that the technical image quality is very, very close to this, even though this is still number one, if you ask me. I hope you found this video useful and that you will hit the like button in that case. Please remember, when you give the comments to the video here, that I stated very precisely that this is based on my specific use case. Your mileage may vary. You may use the lens for a different purpose. And please let me know in the comments if you have a different experience with this lens. Maybe you are a happy shooter for all dimensions when it comes to this lens. I'm really curious to understand that. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. What do I know? But this is where I am right now. As always, thank you for watching. Happy shooting. Take care. Bye-bye.